No, I didn't know it was going to take 4 years. I knew it was hard. It was going to take a long time, but there were many different paths. Like any kind of fundamental technology company, you explore many paths to the outcome. You don't commit to one quickly. You explore many at once until you decide. And so that's what we did as well. On the other hand, I think it's really critical to get to market as fast as humanly possible. So in our business, we were proving two things out at once.
Welcome to NC Tweener Talks, powered by NC Idea, a weekly podcast by builders for builders, where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from North Carolina. Now, here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the NC Tweener Fund, Scott Wingo.
First, a huge thank you to our platinum sponsor. NC Idea Foundation empowers North Carolinians to achieve their entrepreneurial potential by offering support when and where they need it most. First, a huge thank you to our gold sponsors. Today, we are featuring Ballantine, turning success into significance. We help founders translate their wins into lasting family impact, so wealth fuels purpose, not pressure. We'd also like to recognize our silver sponsors. Today's Tweener Talk features Automated Consulting Group. From AI strategy to ROI in 90 days, Automated Consulting Group brings executive-level AI expertise to businesses without enterprise budgets. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for supporting the North Carolina Tweener Talks and the entire Tweener community. It takes an ecosystem to build a thriving community, and sponsors like these are invaluable. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. Well, now that we have Tweener Madness in the rear view mirror, thanks everyone for listening and watching to that. It was really fun this year. We had 8 great companies and very excited by the outcome. It was great to see all the pitches. And as you watch that, I encourage every founder to think about how would you pitch those companies and what have you learned about that pitch that you can use to improve your own pitching. Well, we've been saving a really special episode for post-Tweener Madness to really kind of jump back into our normal programming. Longtime listener viewers may have noticed that we have been interviewing founders from all stages of the startup lifecycle. For a while, we did later stage companies. Probably the latest stage was Todd at Pendo. Then we recently went early stage and we interviewed Opine, Mook Test, Protect 3D, all relatively early in their journey as founders and building companies. So you could get a flavor for what's going on at that part of the life cycle. For this episode, we have Marc Minor, CEO and co-founder of Higharc. They are in the growth stage, so they've raised over $80 million up to a Series B this far. And I've met Marc several times and have always learned great founder lessons from him. I've started 5 companies and I'm a lifetime learner. And one of the best parts about my Tweener job is I get to meet all the founders and I learn so much from meeting other founders. That's what inspired this whole Tweener Talks podcast, is to make sure that you guys could get the benefit of those conversations as well. First of all, Marc has the best pitch decks, bar none, that I've ever seen. I see a lot of great pitch decks. We have a lot of great entrepreneurs in the triangle. I've seen non-triangle pitch decks. I've seen the pitch decks for all kinds of companies that get published out there. I guarantee you Higharc has the best pitch deck you've ever seen. It's just like simply amazing. I could I have to, when he sends them, I have to like carve out like hours to go through it and like really just kind of decompose what it is he's done in there. That ties into his second thing that I always enjoy when I spend time with Marc, is he is an amazing storyteller. And I'm a technology person, and this is a skill I'm always working on. I'm an introvert, and becoming an extrovert and really leaning in on that and being able to tell stories is a skill I've been working on for 30 years, and I still have so much to learn. And every time I interact with Marc, I learn a ton. In fact, when I was recording this podcast, I was kind of in my head, I was thinking, oh my God, this is the best storytelling ever. I hope that people realize that. So then I thought, well, in my little preamble, I can tell people. So my challenge to you is that, number one, as founders, I think we can always be better storytellers. Even Marc could be a better storyteller, even though he's like really up there in the elite category. Everyone can always be better at this. It's just a skill that you can constantly improve on. And my challenge to you guys is, as you listen or watch this, if you listen, I do think maybe going back and watching, if you like the way Marc tells stories, because there is a visual element to storytelling that he really captures as well. So I encourage you to kind of do both if you find this an interesting topic to you. But my challenge to you is, as you watch this, try to work on two levels. So number one, definitely listen to his story. And there's 4 or 5 really good nuggets in there that I want you to take away as founders around competitive moats, how you fundraise, that type of thing. But the meta, one level up, the meta thing that I think you'll take away from this is, how is he telling these stories in a way that's so compelling and engaging? And try to take some of the techniques that you see him exhibit there and apply them to your storytelling. Again, this has got a lot of great nuggets for every founder. I think it's really cool. My favorite one is how his company is leveraging AI for a competitive moat. I'm not going to spoil what they're doing there, but I actually didn't know that going into this podcast. They were doing it at such a level they are. I thought that was amazing. And I learned a ton from this podcast. I hope you do as well. Really enjoyed this one. And you can kind of see why Marc is building a great company here in the Triangle. And we're super excited to be a small participant in this company on the cap table. And I think we're going to see some really big things come out of Higharc over the coming 5 to 10 years. And also, I'm going to be at Raleigh-Durham Startup Week, and so will Marc. So come see us there. We're not going to be on stage together. He's doing a different talk, but this is the great thing about having folks like this here locally, is we get to see them, and you can go meet him and ask him a bunch of questions if you found this interesting. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Without further ado, here is Marc Minor, CEO and co-founder of Higharc. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. I'm joined here by Marc Minor. He is CEO and founder of Higharc. Hey, Marc, how are you?
I am lovely. Very good.
Yeah, good to see you. I've been trying to get you on the pod for quite a while. You're CEO of one of the fast. You're busy. You're one of the fastest growing companies in the Triangle, but you're also kind of under the radar. So this will be a fun one. I think people are going to be shocked by what you've built right here in Durham.
Yeah, thank you. It's a bummer that we're under the radar, but that's great.
No, in your world, you're over the radar, but like you're in such a vertical that a lot of people don't know. I kind of put you. Why don't we start this one? Why don't you explain to folks what Higharc does?
Yeah, so Higharc's a software platform for home builders. We help them replace tons of labor, software practices. We integrate many different steps in the value chain for design, sales, and construction of new houses using an AI platform for design through construction. So we generatively produce homes in 3D on the web, and then we create everything from construction documentation to estimating data to sales experiences for buyers directly from that generative model, which for a home builder eliminates just weeks of work per house, saves them ton of money on the margin side because they're making less errors in the field, and helps them to sell more homes, which is pretty cool.
And these are small local builders, or all the way up to national builders? Like where are you in the TAM of builders?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know there's about 1 million houses built every year in the US. So right now we're really focused on the US. We do have a bunch of customers in Canada as well. But we're pretty focused on the US, and there's about 1 million houses that are built on average in the US every year. So right now we focus on new single family construction, and we focus on builders who are building a lot of houses per year, not the kind of, GC who does a custom house on your land and maybe they do 5 houses per year. We work with the builders who generally build more than 20 houses per year, all the way up to several thousand houses per year across the US. And that's about, of the 1 million or so homes that are built every year, about 50% of those are built by builders who build like a lot of houses, like over 100 houses. And then the other 50% are built by builders who do less than 100 houses. And so we tend to skew a little bit on the larger end today, but we do have about 20% of our customer base builds less than 100 houses per year today.
When I first were an investor and when I first saw your pitch deck, you have the best pitch deck I've ever seen. Because right inside of your pitch deck, it's very interactive. So you can actually see the product go from a 2D drawing, which we've all seen if you've ever had anything to do with houses, like your typical 2D CAD drawing to, it's kind of wild. It animates and then it like flattens out and builds the house right in front of you in 3D. And then you can like spin around, go inside of it. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Let's kind of now go back. How did you end up here? Like, have you always been in this builder space? And where are you from? How did you get to the Triangle? Where'd you go to school? I want to learn all the things.
Didn't go to school here, not from here. I do have a grandmother who's no longer with us, but who lived in Murphy, North Carolina, which is deep in the mountains, in the Smokies. So I grew up coming down there in the summers and being called the Yankee. But I'm from the Northeast originally, from New Jersey and the Boston area. And I made my way down here first in 2013. We were here for about 6 months in 2013. And then I finally came back down and settled permanently in 2018. We just kind of, like a lot of people, loved the balance of urban, sort of urban places, lifestyle, coupled to space and, beautiful trees and woods, that kind of thing. So I have 2 kids. We had 2 kids. We moved here, and it's just been great. The Triangle is a great place for families. So, and that's sort of part of the genesis of our business as well. So when we moved here, we were looking at some land to purchase and build on. We wanted to build a house. At the time, I was in 3D printing, so I had been a part of 2 of the fastest growing 3D printing startups over the last couple of decades, focused on metals as well as plastics for manufacturers. And so that was kind of the world I was living in when we went to build a house. And so I naturally felt like I should have some capability to figure this thing out, this whole home building thing out, knowing as I do a fair amount about how things are made, not only on sort of the hardware side, but on the software side as well. So I'm like, okay, I'm sure those patterns will apply to housing. And sure enough, that was very much not the case. I very quickly had to surround myself with a bevy of really like high cost specialists to help me figure out what can I build, what will it cost, and is it even worth it for me? Will it ultimately be worth it for me to buy this land in the first place? My mindset was just a sort of a typical buyer trying to shop. What can I get? What will it cost? What are the trade-offs? And to shop, I had to pay a lot of money, and I had to sort of spend a lot of time, treating this sort of shopping experience and the home like it was a piece of artwork. And to me, it was fairly obvious that you could take a lot of what's happening in advanced manufacturing and sort of product development in terms of software enablement and apply it over to our industry. And very specifically, what I mean is that world, the sort of product development world, was at the time, this was around 2017, going through a meaningful exploration of sort of software-driven design or simulation-driven design, generatively producing parts and assemblies based on requirements instead of a human having to design them explicitly. So you would express kind of constraints. You would express like environmental conditions, performance targets, mating surfaces, and then you would use software to try and help you design the part. That's the world I was living in. And it just felt very obvious that you could take that same approach and apply it to homes, where every house is a product, but it's highly customized. It's highly variable. So it's a very good fit for that kind of more generative approach. Yeah. So I started Higharc to essentially do that. I found three co-founders. I recruited each of them, had never met them before. And I raised some capital and got going in 2018.
Cool. So you got there through 3D printing. It's pretty wild. So you're taking the digital manufacturing, I guess you call it advanced manufacturing, capabilities that you discovered in the 3D printing world, and you're now applying them to home building.
Yeah, that's definitely a better, more concise way to put it.
That's interesting that you made that. It's interesting how as entrepreneurs you see these patterns, and it gives you a bit of a roadmap. You see an industry that's ahead of another, and then you can push the laggard industry into where the leading one is. Very cool.
And the cool thing is that's so accurate. And also what makes it really neat and hard, but neat, is we don't have to deal with all of these more this mature ecosystem that like you do in manufacturing and product development, where you have to kind of navigate your way around all of these entrenched players. We get a big greenfield opportunity.
So you had the idea, and then how did you? I presume at the 3D printing companies, you weren't a founder; you're an individual contributor, manager type. And then, how did you take the jump from being an individual contributor to the plunge of being an entrepreneur?
So the first thing I'll say is I've always wanted to start companies ever since I was in college. I always wanted to start companies. All I would do was read books about founders and all of that. But growing up in the Northeast and sort of the New York ecosystem, I always felt like I had a lot. I had to sort of figure everything out before I would be ready to start a company. I wasn't exposed to the sort of the startup sort of ethos that I think on the West Coast is much more common. And so I always wanted to start companies, but I was always kind of scared to do it. I always felt like I needed to sort of first like know everything and prove everything, before I started a company. And it wasn't until I joined 3D printing companies. Those were my first startups. Those two 3D printing companies, that I realized nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just figuring out. And I mean that in the
That's
most
the whole point.
positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that in the most positive way. You just jump in. And so it was really empowering for me. And so I was on the leadership team of both of those 3D printing companies, and was both were early when I joined. We're talking like 20 to 40 people, and grew to a couple hundred quickly. And so I had a lot of, I think, I got to really cut my teeth, and see up close and personal what it's like to go through a quick, fast growth period. Um, and I think that just gave me a lot of comfort and confidence to start a company after I got fired from my last job. So my boss told me when we moved to North Carolina, and I think he kind of sniffed out that I was already exploring something. He sat me down one day. I was actually like super commuting between North Carolina and Boston. He was like, "Hey," and everyone's in person except me. He was like, "Hey, um, this isn't working anymore. Like you can't be commuting back and forth to work at a manufacturing company." He's like, "But don't worry, I'm doing you a favor because you should start a company."
Probably didn't feel like it at the time, but maybe in
It did
hindsight,
not feel like it at the time at all.
yeah.
At all. So I got a nice little kick in the butt to go start a company, and I was already working on this thing that ended up being Higharc. And so he really, my boss at the time, he really encouraged me. He was the first check into the company. He was on the board for the first several years. Um, yeah, and I credit him for a lot of the sort of kick in the butt that I needed to get things going.
I like your comment about no one knows what they're doing. By definition, if you're in a greenfield area like you are, no one's built what you're building. Therefore, there is no roadmap, and no one else knows. So you have as just sometimes it actually is an advantage not knowing what you don't know, because then you don't worry about, oh my god, how what's going to happen when we get to the builder supply companies or something like that. You'll just power through that and deal with it as it comes, versus spending too much time up front worrying. It gives you the freedom to start building in an unpermissioned kind of way, because you don't know what you don't know.
That's very true. And build we did. We spent 4 years building software before we went to market.
As a first time founder, how was it fundraising? Did you find, so this is a category I would call prop tech. Is that what you would call it?
I wouldn't have called it that then. I didn't think about it that way. We're just a technology company, focused on houses. But now I suppose folks would classify it as prop tech. Yeah.
And then how was it? So you had your boss write a check, which was good. Did you do kind of the classic pre-seed kind of thing? Walk us through a little bit of the early fundraising, because we have a lot of founders that are way earlier than you are in the cycle, and I think it always helps them to hear how did someone else approach this.
I think everyone has a different journey when it comes to fundraising. And my only advice the best real advice I think that everyone should take from me when it comes to fundraising is like use what you got. Like figure out what you really have. Like what do you have unique leverage over or access to, and then lean into that. And so for me, having been formerly a marketing person, I had done pitches. I had written them, and you're constantly pitching. That's the job. You're constantly pitching, really. And so, in many ways, that part of it was quite natural for me. Um, but the learning what is important for investors and um, how to touch the right notes in a conversation quickly really took just a lot of failure. You know how it is. You just talk to a lot of people. So when I got started, it was like February of 2018, and I spent from February until July really like badly pitching the company. You know, um,
You gotta fail fast.
and adjusting, yeah, and adjusting and I'm not even sure I knew that I was pitching some of those times. Um, and I wasn't sure how much money to ask for, because at the time I had product design and I had a deck, right? Um, what I had going for me was I had been a part of, like, I was a known quantity in certain circles because of my work in 3D printing. Like the two 3D printing companies I was a part of at the time were huge, success stories from a fundraising and visibility perspective. We did a huge TED talk, all this kind of stuff. And I knew obviously the folks who were on the boards of those companies. And so, I was able to maybe open some doors just because of that experience. And that maybe a lot of folks aren't able to do. And so that for me, that's what I had. What I had was the network through my previous startups. And so I leaned into that really heavily. And I was thankful for my former boss as well, for his network and his help um, with intros, that kind of thing. But it wasn't until the crazy thing is, like, I sat down for dinner with my former boss. He was asking how things were going. He hadn't put the check in, by the way, quite yet. So just to be clear, there was no money to the company at that point. Like, and I was trying to figure out, like, there was no such thing as pre-seed at that point. I was trying to figure out, like, oh, should I raise like a note, like 250K on a note, or 500K, or what? And he sort of helped me navigate that, to think about it as, like, if you're going to raise money, raise a round, do a priced round, and just tell people you're raising a priced round, and have basically confidence and conviction, regardless of all the things that you think are weaknesses about you and your business. Confidence, conviction are so crucial, and you got to be willing to ask. You got to be willing to make an ask. And sometimes I think we negotiate against ourselves as first time founders. And I was certainly in that boat. And so I had this dinner with him, and he was like, asked me how it was, and I walked him through, and he was like, let's work on the pitch a little bit. So I did the pitch. He did the pitch back at me, and with a couple of tweaks, and I did it back at him. And that night I came out with really a revamped pitch. It was the same company, just a revamped pitch that, like, the next day, I pitched to a VC firm in Boston called Pillar, and they asked me to sort of, like, hold on for a minute, and they went away and they came back in with a term sheet, which was pretty fun for me. And I was very excited. And I was like, well, let's just go sign this term sheet. So went ahead and did that, and then we proceeded. Like, the pitch kept working, and I proceeded to raise twice the amount that I was planned that the term sheet was originally written for. And so we ended up raising much more. We ended up raising like 4.7 million, which at the time was a lot, for a seed. And we're off to the races. Yeah. But there's a lot I would do differently now that I know what I know.
Hindsight's 2020. Absolutely. Was when you originally went out there for this first 4.7 million, we'll call it a pre-seed, even though you didn't know to call it that. Did you know it was going to take 4 years to build this, or you just knew you were going to build in the space at that point, and that was kind of the pitch?
No, I didn't know it was going to take 4 years. I knew it was hard. It was going to take a long time, but there were many different paths. Like any kind of fundamental technology company, you explore many paths to the outcome. You don't commit to one quickly. You explore many at once until you decide. And so that's what we did as well. Um, on the other hand, I think it's really critical to get to market as fast as humanly possible. So in our business, we were proving two things out at once. We were proving out we were de-risking the technology side, which was a substantial risk what we do is really hard. And it wasn't clear. We were trying to avoid building a full CAD system, computer aided design platform at the outset. We were really trying to avoid that. Turns out we kind of had to do it. So on the one hand, we were doing like de-risking of the technology. On the other hand, we had to de-risk the go-to-market and the business, the value proposition. And so we did an announcement of the funding. This is the thing that I really knew how to do. I was kind of like easy. We did an announcement of the fundraising with an emphasis on PR, on media, because the original version of our business was direct to consumer. And we got a great piece with Curbed. And we had a website stood up, which made it seem like we had a product that we didn't have, which is fine because that's the way it is. You pull people in, you're honest with. It's not like we didn't lie to people about where we were at, but we wanted to pitch the vision.
Fake it till you make it.
We wanted to pitch the vision and see what the market reaction was to that, And so we had this great website pitching the vision and a piece of media to drive a lot of attention. We had a ton of people from all over the U.S. sign up. And essentially started working directly with a bunch of home buyers who were looking to build a house and a bunch of small builders. And we had architects on staff. In the meantime, we're building software. We had architects on staff, and we're sort of, dog fooding, if you will, what the technology would eventually need to do. And so in the early days, it wasn't obvious that it was going to be 4 years. It wasn't obvious it was going to be quick, but it wasn't obvious it was going to take a long time. Either. And but you have to just experiment and market regardless, and see what sticks, which is what we did.
Another frequently asked question I get from first-time founders that kind of fit your profile is they're like, I've been doing marketing and sales, kind of that part of the world, and I want to start a company. How do I find a tech team or a tech co-founder? How did you solve that? Did you go learn the code or?
Yeah. So to be fair, I have a background as a programmer. I have a background self-taught, from when I was young, as well as a product development person. So I had built a lot of things and led the building of a lot of things. So in my last role, for example, I had marketing as well as product, So for me, it wasn't quite so stark. Like I knew what I was doing and how to look for the right people. But I certainly was not going to build the software myself. This was not my skill set at all, particularly given how deep it was. And so I was in that boat in many ways. And so what I did with my co-founding team, so there's a bunch of different ways to build a co-founding team. In my circumstance, I was fortunate enough to raise capital. And a lot of folks need to bring on a co-founding team first, which is fine. Either way, I think it's crucial to know what skills you bring to the table as a CEO, if you are going to be the CEO, first time founder, and then aggressively find folks who are complementary to you. And whether that's technology or architecture, which in my case was a big part of it, or video game technology, so we needed to bring in someone who was an expert in Unreal Engine. But get really crisp on the jobs to be done, and where you're weak. And then in my case, I aggressively recruited. I literally, and to this day, I still do cold LinkedIn recruiting. I think it's one of for me, recruiting and team building is a really important skill. And so there's no way to get around the nuts and bolts of talent recognition and recruiting, being able to convince people to join the thing that you're doing that today doesn't exist. You've got to be a salesperson as a founder. And so in terms of identifying talent, I think there are many ways to do that. For technical co-founders, I think, generally speaking, someone's prior success is a strong indicator of their future success. So if you can't find something that they've done themselves that you're really excited about, probably not worth your time. you know. That's like a simple way to cut to the chase. Simple way to cut to the chase. Another thing is like given the complexity of what I was doing, I was focused on research papers, people's like theses from their graduate programs, and really like looking for folks who had an overlap with what I was trying to do. I knew the technical problems I was trying to solve, and so I was looking at people's prior work in graduate school, and then seeing if they had gone on to do interesting things in technology, and then I would put those two and two together and reach out.
It seems like the class of problem that you have to solve here is how do you go from a 2D thing to a 3D thing? And that's not easy because so that's one, and then the visualizations of these things, and then back out to building materials. Is that like kind of the class of problem you're solving?
Yeah, well, at the beginning for me, it was some combination of deep knowledge of CAD systems, computer design, and specifically computer design on the web, which is a very unique sort of overlay. Most computer design software is written for desktop-based software and C++, and it's just not the world that we live in on the web. And often those guys don't actually want to work on the web stack. They feel it's too simplistic or whatever. And so, and this, maybe things have changed now, but that was one target. And another one is architectural expertise, knowledge of homes and how they go together and how design systems work. Because what we do is we build a kind of capability to express homes as data, as in a sort of systematic way, where we generate them all at once from parts and pieces. And so being able to decompose the problem in a rigorous way, in a way that respects the domain and understands the nuance is really critical. And so that was another really sort of important vector for me. And then the third was, as you mentioned, visualization. I felt at the time that because the sort of readily available lower cost GPUs were becoming more common at that time. And I felt that, 3D on the web is still at the sort of edge of of what's possible. And I felt that we could learn a lot from procedural content generation in video gaming, where based on a user's action, the environment changes, and sort of there's technical skill set to build those kinds of environments, and so it can feel natural and authentic, but also be programmatic. It's an interesting skill set. Technical artists, I guess, is one of the terms used in that world. Technical directors, that kind of thing. So yeah, those were the three kind of areas that I was focused on with the founding team. Yeah, I had the go-to-market side. I had kind of product intuition, that kind of thing. And then I augmented it with three other folks who ended up being even better than I could have expected. They're all three of them are just insane, and they're still with us. It's pretty awesome.
So you did your first round there, and then you guys, to fast forward, you guys have raised. I'm looking at Crunchbase, like on the order of 80 million. It says sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Yeah. So you've gotten good at fundraising. That's good. and yeah, I would say first at bat to get 4.7 is already good. And so give us an update on where the company is now.
As I mentioned, we started the company in 2018. We started it as a remote business, and so we are distributed across the U.S. and we also have a pocket of folks abroad. We're about 170 people today, spread across the U.S. and abroad. We've got about 40 people in Brazil, for example, architects and designers, really talented group down there. We help builders across the nation. We have customers in every major geography here, every major MSA where home building is happening. Tens of thousands of houses have been built using our generative tools, which is pretty neat. We are the only serious AI platform for housing. It's a very specific problem set, spatial AI, that you need really great data for. And there's no good data for sort of geometric reasoning specific to houses that's really available outside of what Higharc does, which is pretty cool. So that puts us in a really great spot to continue forward using everything that's happening with LLMs as a kind of tailwind. What's hard about our business and maybe somewhat unique is the fact that we are really narrowly focused on new home construction in the US, on home builders. Like today, trades can't use the platform, so subcontractors can't use it, home buyers can't use it directly on their own. Um, Other parts of the value chain can't use it directly. And that's like a bug, not a feature of our business. And so looking forward, what I'm hopeful for is that the sort of really enabling power of transparency about what is the house, how much does it cost, what are the parts and pieces, how can we change it in order to do better. I'm hopeful that that kind of enabling transparency becomes available to more of the ecosystem, and everybody can take advantage of this kind of data, where today they're just using drawings.
Let's talk about AI. That's a really good segue there. So you started this 2 years before ChatGPT, but you were building for a period of time, and it seems like some of the companies that were born before ChatGPT got walloped by it, right? It seems like you guys have just like kind of gotten on that wave and ridden it to success. How did and it's probably LLMs aren't probably the underlying technology, because I realize there's a spatial versus a textual kind of thing going on there. Talk a little bit about that, like how did that pop on your radar? How did you lean into that wind to ride it?
Well, the first thing to understand is the problem of expressing buildings as usable data that you can train machine learning models on is not a recent problem. That is not something that came about because of LLMs, like the transformer architecture and all of that. My co-founder, Michael, was responsible for the generative design and AI research focus at Autodesk, trying to take the systems like Revit, which is a design and modeling tool for commercial, for AEC, and train neural networks using its data. The problem is there's not really usable data there to do that with. It's a really hard problem. And so when we started Higharc, an important aim in the business was to be data first, create buildings as data, not as geometry. It's a flipping of the script in many ways for how to think about the problem of design. Most design tools think about the problem from a design tool perspective, which is to say, they think about the problem in terms of points and lines on planes or geometry, and then potentially later they tag that with effectively like metadata. It's a very bad way to approach the problem, because buildings are really complex and they're interconnected systems. And so you change one thing and there's a propagating effect across the building, which is hard to trace unless you have a data first approach to the problem. And so we were always building toward, it used to be more in vogue to talk about generative design, generative tools. And we were always building toward that. And that set us up to take advantage of the transformer architectures in a really important way, sort of LLMs from the frontier models, but also just our ability to train our own models on our own data, because we produce homes as text. So like a Revit file, for example, for one of our customers' homes is 6 gigabytes. That same home in Higharc is 11 megabytes. It's a JSON file. And we express the home as text. We have think of this as like, you're familiar with Palantir? The whole concept of an ontology. Same basic idea. We have a domain-specific language for homes, or we have an ontology for buildings, kind of semantic model. And that's been really valuable to be able to be nimble as the world has changed around LLMs. So about 3 years ago, one of my co-founders, Michael, and I were chatting, and he's been on this always. Like, just to give you some context, his license plate when I first met him was generate, which is like, generate with an 8.
Our co-GP Robbie has been doing generative AI since 2013. So yeah, there's a set of people that were really super early on this stuff.
Yes, exactly right. And so 3 years ago, we formally put resources against it. And so for the last few years, we've been doing a handful of things. One has been sort of shoring up our own data set, making sure we invest in data labeling more aggressively in order to train models and fine-tune open source models. And then the other has been targeted model development in ways that augment what you can get out of the box with LLMs. So, for example, one of the realities in our world is there are drawings everywhere. Everyone has drawings of stuff, drawings of plans, whatever. And going from a 2D drawing to a rich 3D model is a hard problem. And so, one of our areas of investigation from a research perspective has been training visual language models. You know, and so there are two areas that we focus. One has been a kind of um, translation of an image to our data model, so we can produce a 3D building model from an image. And then the other has been a kind of layout prediction, where based on rooms in houses, we can predict based on the room type and the boundaries, we can predict the layouts of those rooms.
Well, then you can iterate, and then you could show furniture, you could show like once you can do that, you can keep going, right?
Exactly. So hopefully this gives you some sense for kind of how we've pursued it. At the same time, we've built our own. We've over time gotten better at building our own harness, our own agent harness, so we can leverage models across our platform. We use everything we can get our hands on in the product, from image generation, being able to take a low resolution generative model that we produce and produce a very high resolution photoreal experience that matches your description. This is something everyone's familiar with at this point with diffusion models. Or being able to ask the building questions and get responses about the building. So, for example, can I fit a table and chairs for 12 on my rear patio? It can give you an answer. And then it can tell you, you can't actually fit that, but here's three ideas for how you could change the design to fit it. Do you want me to do one of those three things? And we're like, yeah, go ahead and do that thing. And then we can actually do it. And we can tell you the price changes and all of that. So we weren't caught flat-footed, I think, the way many folks were. And because of the space we're in with sort of relying on geometric reasoning, it's not something that LLMs do well, you know? And so, if anything, all that's been happening with AI has been a massive tailwind for our business.
I want to pause here and kind of circle back because another question I get all the time, you're like just checking them off. It's magic. And, and we didn't even prepare for this. Probably the number one question I get from people that are a bit further along, like you guys, is how do I tell, let's pretend you were raising a round and you had to go tell a VC why AI isn't going to wallop you. You've actually done a perfect job on that already. So the question that I get a lot is, how do I talk about competitive moats in an AI world when anyone can vibe code anything, right? No one's going to vibe code what you just said, because what you have is competitive moat. And the way I'm actually doing a talk at Raleigh-Durham Startup Week. I'll do a self-promotion on this around competitive moats in the AI world. And one of the best one is proprietary data, right? So a data network effect. So the way I like to talk about it is, your first customer, which was a builder, had a product experience that was good, but your 100th had a better one because they had the benefit of all the 99 people that went before them and all the data trained on your model. So now your model is much better because it's this rising tide of data quality that you're getting, because now you're seeing the edge cases go away. And by the time you got to, how many houses did you say you've done? 10,000? Somewhere around house. Yeah, somewhere around house 1,000, you've probably seen most edge cases, and certainly by home 10,000. You've seen all the weird edge cases, don't create a closet where the door opens this way, and all those things. So, and then as the model gets smarter, it gives you an unfair advantage. So that's the competitive moat. So said another way, if someone were starting Higharc today, it would. Sure, maybe they could write some software a little bit faster than you could when you started, but they're never going to catch up to your unfair advantage of having those tens of thousands of houses trained in your system.
Yeah, that's perfectly said.
For it.
Do you see my slide? I just wanted to reflect back to you what you just said. That's absolutely correct. The only thing that's different in our case, and in some ways, this is it's really just the next level
three
up.
Compounding moats. Whoa, you went meta on me. All right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just what you just said. It's another way of saying there's a flywheel when you have a data moat as well as a vertically oriented business. Correct. Correct. That's right. And this is something folks are understanding now with spatial AI, is that it's just not the same. You have to be able to. And so, like in our case, I was mentioning this predictive layout ability. The interesting thing about the way we did that was we're actually tokenizing the building. So it's next token prediction, but we're tokenizing we're tokenizing space.
It's a world model.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to think about it. It's a very simplified. Yes, exactly. Right.
Right here in the triangle. Amazing. Cool. I know you're super busy, and I promise to give you a little back more time back in your day. Anything else you'd want to tell other aspiring founders out there about your journey before we wrap up?
Well, we're all just figuring it out all the time is something that I think everyone should always hear. There's imposter syndrome among all of us, no matter what stage we're at. And so I think getting in peer groups is really valuable. Finding CEOs that are similar stage, maybe a little beyond you, and getting in a regular peer group is just impossible to replace, And there are many ways to get to it. No one told me this. I had to sort of figure it out on my own. But they do exist. There's networks out there, and you can even put one together yourself and just meet up monthly or quarterly and open your books and talk about your biggest challenge at that moment in time. It's really valuable. I recommend it really highly. For me, it's been really useful.
I have one for you. You're a really good storyteller. Let's say someone's not as good a storyteller as you are, which is like 99.8% of the population. How did you get to be such a good storyteller? Was this just something like your parents were good storytellers and you were like born this way, or like did you have to work at it? Like,
it's a skill. I mean, it's of course a skill. They're just patterns.
Do you study other storytellers?
Yes, of course. Exactly right. Like I told you, I used to read books.
Who's your favorite?
Who is my favorite storyteller? Oh my gosh. What an interesting question. This is obnoxious. This is so obnoxious. But right now it's Elon Musk. Honestly, that's hilarious and obnoxious. But he tells stories that regardless of what part of his life he's in. He
paints a picture of the future that's compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it's obnoxious.
To many people.
It's so impressive.
Yeah, and I bet you like Steve Jobs. Are you a Steve Jobs? Bicycle of the mind?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, of course. But no, there was this book I read forever ago. It still sticks with me sometimes, and it's Why Elephants Can't Dance. Or I think that's what it was called, Why Elephants Can't Dance. This is college. I'm going back to college at this point. Did I get that right? Who says elephants can't dance? The story of the IBM revival.
Oh yeah. You can't dance with elephants. So something like that. Yeah.
Who says elephants can't dance? Lou Gerstner. And, I felt like that's when you talk about storytelling and you think about like how you can educate yourself up. Those kinds of books I feel are just really valuable, Yeah. But I will say, if you're not a great storyteller, you should find someone who is. Augment yourself rather than try to train yourself up, and then learn by watching. That's actually maybe the best piece of advice I could give, is be in the room with people who are great storytellers, and pay attention. Yeah. Which is why I had the benefit of that, both of my previous startups. Both founders, one guy's actually a Triangle guy, Jody Simone. Insanely good storytellers.
I was going to ask if that was one of the 3D printing companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marc, thanks for your time. We're very excited to see what you build here in the Triangle. You guys have, continued to just have awesome success, and we're huge fans of what you're doing there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Glad to be a part of this.
NC Tweener Talks is hosted by Scott Wingo, presented and produced by NC Tweener Fund, which is powered by NC Idea, with creative assets and design support from our friends at Walk West. That's it for today's episode. A big thank you to our guests, sponsors, and the team that makes this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves the startup stories coming out of the North Carolina Tweener Talks.